Time for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Dr. Constance, do take us through.
Good morning, Yolanda.
Good morning,
Good morning, Dr. Constance.
Good morning, Gwenga.
So, ready to blaze what's in the oven today?
A lot. The energy sector is shaking. I'm sure we're
Shivering.
already aware, but there's so many other stories in the offing today. All right, let's look at those stories that are shaping the agenda for you today. We'll kick off with this day newspaper. A quick snapshot by major papers this morning. There's shake-up in oil sector leadership with resignations and new regulators named. Security and public order with nationwide protests by labor against insecurity on the economy. Fiscal tensions over budget processes and oil pricing benchmarks also feature in today's newspapers. Tax reform anxiety and reports of mistrust, grid instability and declining electricity supply due to gas shortfalls, plus Senate criticism of repeated multi-year budget implementations. Now this day leads with the biggest story in the energy sector, the resignation of the Nigerian midstream and downstream petroleum regulatory authority CEO Farouk Ahmed and the Nigerian upstream petroleum regulatory commission NUPRC head Gbenga Kumolafe. New names have been announced. And in regard to security, Office of the National Security Advisor denies claims that he has provided arms to any socio-cultural organization. This is in response to some online reports on that matter. And more on the budget. The executive wants 43.46 trillion naira to end multiple budget cycles. Moving on to Daily Sun, which has gone with the House of Reps member alleging alteration of tax laws, saying the law currently in circulation is different from the harmonized version passed by the National Assembly. Wabara tells PDP leaders they must reconcile to rescue Nigeria. Vanguard newspaper goes with that running battle with Burkina Faso coming to an end, as it is reported that Nigerian aircraft and soldiers have been released after Foreign Affairs Minister Yusuf Tagar met with Burkina Faso leader. An opposition tells President Tinubu that he cannot tax hunger. This is in relation to the new tax laws that are coming in effect in January. There's dissent bubbling over these new tax laws, and people are questioning it. With astronomical rise in cost of living, double-digit inflation, what is the government taxing? The opposition asked. Court has ruled and barred the Inspector General of Police and the Nigerian Police Force from enforcing tinted glass permit policy. Daily Independent this morning reflects on the VAT slump and oil weakness that is deepening Nigeria's fiscal position. Experts warn states will have to make tough choices. And Senate considers review of 2025 budget to 43.5 trillion. Daily Trust questions whether the new tax laws have been altered. A similar alarm, raised earlier in Daily Sun that we saw, where the lawmaker says the legislation passed is different from what currently exists. New Telegraph reads about continuing pipeline vandalism that has led to load shedding. And Nigeria's 2024 budget faces credibility as revenue falls to 10.7 trillion naira. The projection was 40.8 trillion naira. What a gap. That's massive. Customs is planning to slam a 3% interest rate penalty over late customs duty remittance by banks. And the government, well, we can see is trying to drive revenue from all angles, agencies and the federal government as well. In Leadership newspaper, some upbeat news for the environment. Government slaps a ban on wood and allied products exports to curb deforestation. And that alleged discrepancy between the tax law that was passed and one that was gazetted will be addressed, says House of Representatives. And still on the farmer-herder clashes, the Economic Council raises livestock panel to solve the problem. Haven't we had enough panels and committees yet? We have to get on with the actual implementation of what we've raised in the past. Finally, for local papers, the Guardian newspaper this morning highlights Nigeria's fault lines, which it says threatens constitutional reforms and consensus as rep members vote today. Reps also probe FIRS, France MOU on tax administration. We had a lot of dust raised about that. Moving on to the international headlines, if we can pull up Daily Express, the big themes across the front pages are politics and public services, security and conflict, and tabloid-style features, including sports, fan stories, and celebrity business angles. So let's look at Daily Express, which has gone with conservative leader Kemi Badenoch urging a ban on doctor strikes, making it a key domestic political health news item. The Sun leads with a mix of politics, economics, and celebrity. Here it says there's a claim that changes caused by Chancellor Rachel Reeves' budget are to blame for the closure of a restaurant owned by Manchester City's manager, Pep Guardiola. The Times reports that British police plan to crack down on chants or calls for intifada after the Bondi Beach attack. This indicates an emphasis on law and order following that violent incident. Daily Mail says Prime Minister Keir Starmer is planning to suck up to Brussels in a stunning reverse Brexit, and it will cost the UK £6 billion. In Financial Times, Warner Bros. Board scorns illusory bid by Paramount. Daily Telegraph also reports on the UK re-entering Erasmus, noting that the projected cost and political debate around it is really shaking the UK. Our newspaper focuses on British military preparations to send a peacekeeping force to Ukraine. The Guardian runs with an international security story, a campaign of intimidation by Kremlin intelligence against Belgian politicians and finance chiefs. Now let's break down what these stories mean for citizens. This day newspaper, again, if you can pull that up. NMDPRA boss Farouk Ahmed and NUPRC boss Benga Komolafe have resigned. Tinubu nominates Orishemiyiwa Eyeshon as new CEO of NUPRC and Saidu Aliyu Mohammed as CEO of NMDPRA. President Tinubu has made this nomination, so we're waiting for them to be confirmed. Now, yesterday I spoke about the Otedola Farouk Lawan treatment being applied to Farouk Ahmed, and it has worked spectacularly. Extraordinary what has just taken place in that sector, isn't it?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Right. First, it has a wider reflection and a far-reaching implication. It shows that businessmen don't joke with their penny. And you could see that, indeed, government has no business running business. And that's one. On the other side, it leaves a deep concern about the strength of institutions, because if an individual within an entire market value chain is shaking the sector, because this is coming amidst that allegation of economic sabotage and financial impropriety against the CEO, the former CEO now, immediate former CEO of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NMDPRA. So we've had the allegation. We never knew that decisions like this will be, conclusions like this will be coming so fast within the sector. But now we've heard news about the incoming CEO, if they will be able to reverse this trend. But it's surprising to also know that this is an institution where the president himself superintends. And this trend started in 1999 when Obasanjo decided to be the Minister of Petroleum. So one would have expected that such a sector that holds the corner picture of the nation's economy, that such allegation of financial impropriety should not be stinking to the high heavens, but rather we've not seen the difference it makes if the president is superintending over such a sector. But now we've seen Orishemiyiwa, we hope that his name, which means that a gift from the god, a yeson, we'll be able to reverse the trend of production decline and also expand that potential in our oil and gas reserve. I wish them the best of luck.
Yeah, since you've mentioned the new appointees, they have not been confirmed. We're waiting for that. So there has to be a searchlight on that, because from what has happened, you want a petroleum sector with the new incoming bosses. You want a sector that is seen as rules-based and not personally driven.
Right.
Therefore, the immediate task for the new leadership now will be to rebuild public and investor confidence in that sector and demonstrate that there's zero tolerance for regulatory capture, as well as private sector monopoly capture. Because yes, for integrity's sake, we have seen that these people have resigned. At the same time, there is still that question of how powerful one man can become in the context of Aliko Dangote and his companies. Is this in the interest of Nigeria in the long run? Does it return to a situation where one man and his companies can decide what happens in an entire energy sector? These are legitimate questions that are being raised. I know everybody in the frenzy are trying to praise the Dangote refinery for reducing the price of fuel. This is very, very temporary, short term. It's not a long-term thing. Does that drive other competitors out of the market? Does that close the lead on competition? These are questions that I think will continue to
As
raise.
much as your questions are very pertinent, I think we also need to look at the other side of the coin and actually commend the swiftness in how all of this happened. As these accusations came up, I know that they were debunked at some point, but the swiftness in the resignation, and not just the resignation, but in as well bringing in new names for, to take up those roles. So I'd like to at least commend that, because that shows that at least there's some level of accountability in the midst where a lot of things are missing. There's so many questions that are being asked. At least we have this one bit of accountability that says, look, we're going to take these people out of this position, even though it's through their own resignation. We don't know if they were advised to do so or not. We can only speculate on that. But the fact remains that there was such a swift action with it. And, inaction has a high cost. And so it's really good to see this level of accountability.
I think we also need to look at performance bond in this whole situation, because the president, being the head of the nation's petroleum sector, should also be accountable.
Okay,
Absolutely.
let's take a look at the security situation in Niger State. We're joined by Arise correspondent Charles Eruka, who is on ground to bring us up to speed with what's going on there. Charles, can you tell us what's the latest, the update?
Good morning, Dr. Constance. Well, as you can see, Mina, the Niger State capital is gradually coming to life for the activities of another day. And as far as the issue of security is concerned, what has been on the front burner and on the minds of most of the state's citizens is the abduction of over 300 school children and 12 teachers from the St. Mary's Catholic School, Papiri, in Aguara local government area. And that happened on the 21st of November. On the 8th of December, 100 of those children were returned and presented to the governor of the state, Muhammad Umar Bago, by the Office of the National Security Advisor. Now, remember, you have that number of children in captivity, and everyone who is a parent would actually feel the anguish by way of empathy. So it's a sense of anticipation here in the state capital that those children, the remaining children and teachers in captivity, will be returned to their homes, their families, their parents before Christmas. That's the sense of anticipation, and that is the assurance being given by the security services. There is no further information than that, than the fact that the security services are coordinating activities under the supervision of the Office of the National Security Advisor to ensure that the remaining captives are returned.
All
now,
right,
here
Charles,
in the state
let me
capital,
just cut
it will
you there.
interest you to know.
Hi, Charles. Let me just cut in for a bit because we're very short on time this morning. I know that you've been in Niger State for a few days now covering this report, and it's been great. Thank you for that. But can you give us some updates on the situation with the families? What is the feedback? Have you been able to speak to any of the family members and maybe get some insight?
Yolanda, I didn't quite get you there because of the noise from that passing truck. So could you just take your question again?
Were you able to speak to any of the families and get some insight into what is happening?
Now, remember, St. Mary's Catholic School, Papiri, is located in Agwara local government area, and it's like 5 hours away from Minna, the state capital. The school serves the community. So the parents of those children are not resident in the state capital. They are over there in Papiri community, and it takes almost half a day's journey to get there because of the ruggedness of the terrain and the state of the road. It's a very complicated route because you have to travel from Niger State, get into Kebbi State, then travel eastwards, cross River Niger, back into Niger State. That is what it takes to get to meet the parents of those children. In any case, they are under a tight security blanket because any information they may be giving out might jeopardize what they call a very sensitive security operation to release the remaining hostages. So it has been a very, very difficult, if not insurmountable task to get through to any of the parents, given the distance, the remoteness, as well as the security blanket.
Hey, Charles, I'm kind of trapped with the imagination of children caught in the wild with hostile forces. I would have loved to find out how are the children, because of the trauma, adjusting to normal life? But since you talked about the distance now, I want to find out what's the mood, the prevailing mood in Minna now concerning these abducted children, and any word from the governor over the possibility of the release of the remaining children.
The mood is that of cautious optimism. That's how I will put it. The mood in the state capital here, on the surface, appears pretty calm. It feels as if life has returned to normal. But we went around town to speak to the residents, and like I said, those of them who are parents, are feeling the pain. They are feeling the anguish. They are empathizing, with their fellow citizens over there in Papiri. And everyone is hoping that this calm can only be validated when the remaining children in captivity are returned. That's the hope of the people in the state capital that I spoke with, because as far as they are concerned, it's a major security breach. In spite of all the security measures being taken, in spite of the fact that the sitting governor has done a lot in terms of bringing security, restoring security in Niger State, that was a very major dent in the security arrangements. So confidence can only be restored when the rest of the children in captivity are returned. 100 of them have been brought back, but then you have over 200 in captivity. Therefore, as far as the residents of Minna, the state capital, are concerned, it is not yet home and dry. And it's the reason why the governor himself has steadfastly refused to say anything further than the fact that security officials are working round the clock to ensure that the remaining hostages are released. As far as he is concerned, as long as the remaining captives are still being held hostage, then his joy is not complete yet. So there is nothing to celebrate. And when I spoke with the commissioner of police, he actually gave me, an overview of what's going on. The key word here is coordination. Coordination between the police the civil defense, the army, and the Secret Service, namely the DSS, to ensure that there's shared intelligence, actionable information leading to the release or rescue, so to say, of the remaining hostages in captivity.
Charles.
They'll not give you any further information than that.
All right, Charles, thank you very much for those very good updates from Mina in Niger State. That's Charles Eruka reporting from Niger State on the missing abducted girls that are yet to be released. Sorry, Dr. Constance, may we return back to the newspaper review if we still have time for it?
Yes, thank you, Charles. We have very
limited time. Apologies for that.
Very short time. No apologies. That was a great report from Charles. And by the way, Charles looks like the Hamatan. He's dealing with him.
I mean, Charles, these are his kind of
reports.
These are his kind of reports, so he always does pretty well with them.
All right, so let's take one more story. In this day, if we can pull that up, NSA on the allegations of providing arms to a socio-cultural organization. The Office of the National Security Advisor says this is completely false, that it is not doing that. Let's quickly move to Leadership newspaper. Protests and NLC agrees to suspend their labor action on insecurity and economic policy after meeting government officials yesterday. I mean, while the suspension may prevent immediate economic disruption and show that the NLC is open to speaking with the government, at the same time, it risks weakening the labor leverage if concrete relief measures on wages, fuel prices, food inflation, and security do not follow quickly. So it's like they did not achieve anything at the end of the day. So, I mean, without timelines and measurable commitments from the federal government, I think the public frustration will rebound later. And then to our final story. On the international scene, Financial Times, Warner Bros. Board scorns illusory bid by Paramount. We know that Warner Bros. Has decided to back Netflix merger offer instead of Paramount's higher all-cash bid, arguing that the existing plan to sell most of the media company to Netflix is a better deal for shareholders. Again, remarkable turn of events there.
Yes, absolutely. And in this, I'm definitely with Warner Brothers. So now we have two media giants that are fighting to take over Warner Brothers. One is Netflix. Netflix is not trying to buy out Warner Brothers outright. It's trying to form some sort of an alliance and, have some sort of marriage, so to speak, whereas Paramount wants to come and do an outright buy-off of the Warner Brothers. Now, the Warner Brothers is actually a very, very big outlet, as it, hosts HBO, CNN. So to own a company like that means that you're really raking in millions and billions of viewers. Now, on paper, Paramount is the more legible partnership, buyout option, because Paramount is offering more money. But for long-term, for legacy, for stability, it seems like Netflix is better because they are going to leave some sort of a lasting mark for Warner Brothers instead of wipe them out completely.
I think it's about putting your money where your mouth is.
You think so?
It looks like a market war.
But again,
giants.
what is going on? There's a real power shift in the entertainment industry. So moves like this show that giants like Netflix, are now set to take over the consolidation. And the fact is also that it reflects a weakening of traditional studios and legacy media competitors.
Not exactly,
the entire
to each his own.
The entire landscape is changing. In whichever business you're doing, look at us in the media. Print media is almost gone. The internet is taking over with online media. Everybody with a phone is now a media, a journalist, so to speak. So it just shows that the World Wide Web and the Internet of Things is changing the way business is done. And I think we'll continue to see more shifts in the future.
Yeah, indeed. I think the media landscape is becoming very volatile. And people know that once you get control of the media, you control the world.
Well, that depends if the shareholders agree and decide to buy into Netflix.
Indeed.
Well, at the end of the day, it also invites scrutiny over media concentration.
Yes, that's a big one.
And the future
definitely.
of traditional entertainment platforms.
That's definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, those were your headlines for today.